Tonight, I'll take you into the shadowed halls of an old tale, one that is less about love and more about possession. Adrian Blackwood was not just a man, and certainly not just a scholar's curiosity. He was a predator draped in elegance, a creature who could lure even the most cautious heart into his snare. When a devoted zoologist crossed his path, she believed she was studying nature's darkest secrets, but she would soon learn that nature's cruelty was nothing compared to his. Some stories whisper warnings, others bleed romance. This one offers neither escape nor mercy.
The road wound endlessly through the Appalachian Mountains, fog clinging to the trees like a second skin. Dr. Evelyn Hale tightened her grip on the steering wheel of her beat-up Jeep, humming softly to herself as she climbed another steep incline. The radio had gone silent miles back, only static now, so her voice was the only thing keeping the silence from swallowing her whole. Somewhere in these ancient ridges, the crimson wing owl was vanishing, a species so elusive that even seasoned zoologists debated whether its numbers had ever been significant. Yet Evelyn had studied the reports, the dwindling sightings, the strange silences where once their eerie cries echoed. Something was happening, and she intended to find out what. Her colleagues at the university had laughed. "Appalachian superstition," one of them scoffed. "You'll come back with folklore, not field notes." Evelyn let them laugh. Logic and observation had carried her this far. These mountains would yield their secrets to science, not to old wives' tales. Still, she remembered the way some of her colleagues had looked at her when the whiskey was gone and the lights were low. The looks that said they'd seen things too. Tracks that stopped abruptly. Predators that hunted what wasn't supposed to exist. No one ever wrote those things down. Evelyn, though, had. She kept them in a private journal. Besides sketches of feathers and bone, she scribbled questions she couldn't explain. The Jeep crested a hill, and the town appeared below. Black Hollow. A scattering of buildings, crooked and weather-beaten, crouched in the valley like a secret meant to stay hidden. The mountains hemmed it in too tightly, as though the world itself wanted to bury the place. It was quiet, too quiet. Objective, verify reports of crimson wing owl decline, control for observer bias, seasonality, weather, and anecdotal contamination. When she parked at the general store, heads turned. Men on the porch stopped rocking. A woman paused mid-step, their eyes fixed on her, steady, watchful. Evelyn smiled, but the smiles that flickered back didn't touch their eyes. She noted their features automatically, pupils oddly dilated despite the daylight, irises catching the light in shades that looked wrong. Green, almost glowing. Black, so dark they seemed to swallow color. She shook it off. Optical illusion, mountain sun, thin air. Inside the hollow rest inn, a tall woman slid a key across the desk before Evelyn could ask. "Room 7, supper at sundown," she said in a voice flat as stone. Her room was tidy, but the pitcher of water on the dresser startled her, cold, sweating, though no one had entered since she arrived. That night, Evelyn sat at a long wooden table. Stew and cornbread were placed in front of her, hearty mountain fare. She took a bite and frowned, flavorless, as though the meat had been boiled until nothing remained. The other guests, if that's what they were, didn't eat. They sat perfectly still, hands folded, gazes too intent, watching, waiting. Evelyn chewed carefully, her pen poised over her mental notepad. Behavior, unnatural. Group dynamics, rehearsed. Possible cultural ritual. Later, in bed, she jolted awake to footsteps outside her door. Slow, deliberate. They paused at her room. Her chest ached with held breath. Then they moved on. She turned her head and froze. Her lantern was lit. She hadn't touched it. In the morning, she cataloged it logically. Air draft, old wiring, someone playing a joke. But when she reached for her notebook, her pen was uncapped, ink staining the cover. She tightened her jaw. Noted. Not explained, but noted. That afternoon, while hiking the tree line, she found her first evidence. A deer carcass sprawled in the undergrowth. No blood, not a drop. Just pale flesh and bone. Flies buzzed, but the air held no stink of rot. Evelyn crouched, scribbling furiously. Possible poaching. Illegal draining. Ritualistic? Need samples? Field notes. Day 1. In behavior ritualized. Communal silence. Light anomaly. Pen uncapped. Possible staff turn-down service. No owl calls. Barred owls present. Crimson wing absence confirmed. Provisional. At dawn, she ran transects along the tree line, setting 2 trail cams and 3 audio traps programmed for ultrasonic and low-frequency capture. The forest's usual gossip, squirrels, sapsuckers, wind, had gaps, like pages torn from a book. By noon, she found another deer carcass in a shallow gully. It was clean in the wrong way. No pooled blood, no drag marks, no predator scatter. Flies puzzled over it like bad students. Poachers, she said aloud, as if declaring it could make it true. A voice answered without rustling leaves. Not poachers. She flinched, almost dropping her kit. A man stood a few yards upslope, tall, still, dressed in a dark tailored coat that made him look like the only finished thing in a half-built town. His eyes were an impossible green, not bright exactly, but deep, like bottle glass when light finds it. Adrian Blackwood, he said, with a small bow that felt habitual. You're the zoologist. Dr. Evelyn Hale, she said, steady. And I deal in evidence. Then be careful where you collect it. These ridges take things back. She cataloged him the way she did birds. Age range unclear, posture predatory without effort, hands gloved despite mild weather. When she glanced down to note the coordinates and looked up again, he was gone. No twig snap, no brush of fabric. The wind moved, he did not. That evening she analyzed audio. Twice, something answered her crimson wing playback with a perfect call. Then a second undertone D never logged in any species, a harmonic too low to be natural. She tagged it as equipment artifact and queued a retest. The inn was warmer that night. Warmer and wrong. The other guests watched her eat again. Still no one else ate. Field notes. Day 6. Deer. No blood, no tracks. Test for anticoagulants? Playback returned. Harmonic anomaly. Likely device hum. Locals' pupils dilated indoors. Low light? Diet? The creek swelled after sudden rain. Evelyn measured water speed with a floating orange and calculated discharge for a quick habitat assessment. On the way back, the footbridge slicked under her boots. The rope gave. She saw gray water, stones, her own hand. Then a grip caught her forearm mid-fall, precise, cold, unshaking. She hit the bank instead of the river. Adrian stood with one knee braced in mud, his other hand on the broken rope, the posture too balanced to be accidental. Bridges rot, he said. You should test them with a stick. Thank you, she said, annoyed at the gratitude in her voice. He brushed silt from her sleeve with the back of his fingers, a polite gesture that lasted 1 second too long. She stepped back, masking it as a stretch. How did you... I walk here, he said, smiling a little. A lot. The smile looked right and felt like a posed photograph. She went back to her room and rationalized his timing into coincidence and proximity. Then she noticed the bruise pattern blooming under her cuff. 5 ovals, pale at the center, clean at the edges. She measured the span against her own hand. Larger. Field notes. Day 11, nearly fell at creek, assisted by local A. Blackwood. Bruise pattern, temperature at skin, cooler than ambient, misread thermometer, replace bridge on map, mark as hazard. Remember, Stick Black Hollow's social map drew itself. The same men rocked in the same chairs outside the store every morning, counting cars that never came. The same woman swept the same steps. Children played a clapping game with a rhyme about green eyes in the hollow, black eyes in the night, and when Evelyn asked who taught it, They said no one. We just know. Church on Sunday. No hymn books. The congregation mouthed words without sound. The mirrors were covered with cloths, which she chalked up to tradition she didn't understand yet. When she lingered at the back, the pastor placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "Best be in by sundown, doctor." The innkeeper began calling her by her first name. The pitcher in her room refilled itself when she wasn't looking. Twice she locked the door, and twice in the morning her window latch was unfastened. Not open, exactly, just unwilling. She set a length of thread across the sill and dusted the floor with chalk. In the morning, the thread was tied in a neat bow. The chalk was undisturbed. "Cute," she said to the empty room, more angry than afraid. On the trail, she found a neat stack of small bones, vertebrae nested like a spine laid out to study. Someone had knotted grass around the top like a ribbon. She documented it all, tightening her definitions until they squeaked. Ritualized poaching, rural custom, kids being kids. Field notes. Day 18, social routines unnaturally consistent, possible schedule economy, mirror coverings, regional practice, window latch behavior, thread moved without floor disturbance, draft through frame, bone stacks, juvenile prank versus local art. She pulled the trail cam cards and scanned images for movement. On 3 nights, the forest behind her campsite brightened as if someone sparked magnesium out of frame. The pixels registered illumination without a source. On one frame, far back between 2 tree trunks, 2 small circles reflected the flash. They were too high for a fox, too narrow for a deer. She overlaid measurements, ran the math twice, marked the result indeterminate, and paced until her coffee went cold. Her audio traps came back full of swallows, wind, and, on one stretch between 2:07 and 2:11 a.m., no sound at all. Not silence, absence. The software printed a flat line so perfect she thought it had crashed. That night, as she logged her notes, a soft rap touched the door. When she opened it, no one stood there. A clean canteen sat on the floor, the one she'd lost 3 days before, buffed until the metal glowed. The tag on the strap read, in neat, old-fashioned cursive, "For Dr. Hale. You drop things." No signature. The handwriting wasn't quite contemporary. She turned the tag over, and under the paper label saw a darker line beneath, faint as a watermark that wanted to be read. She slept with the lamp on and named it neighborly helpfulness out loud until the word lost meaning. Field notes. Day 24. Camera light spikes without visible source. Lens issue, IR leakage, audio void, check for battery drop. Returned canteen with note, dated penmanship, likely innkeeper. Evelyn traced maps of old mining claims in the county and hiked to the nearest collapsed shaft. Air blew cold from the gaps even on a warm day. She held a strip of ribbon at the opening. It never once fluttered toward the shaft. The flow was inward, as if the mountain were breathing. She collected soil and water samples, testing for iron, arsenic, and weird pH that could explain animal behavior. The creek near the shaft ran clear and tasted like a penny pressed to the tongue. On the way back, thunder went off like a dropped drum. Rain started sudden and hard. The trail slick to soap. She cut for a stand of hemlock, missed her footing, and slid. She braced for the root to crack her spine. And again a hand caught her before the bruise formed. Adrian, second time, exactly when she needed him. He steadied her and stood in the downpour without blinking. Water slicking his hair back, face pale in a way that made the green of his eyes seem lit from behind. "These storms come fast," he said. "You have to listen for the change." "I don't like being followed," she said, breathless. "I don't follow," he said. "I arrive." "On time?" "On time," he agreed, and smiled like it was a private joke. Evelyn noticed Adrian had licked his finger that had her blood on it. He must have scratched her by accident, or maybe it was his. She thought she heard him say underneath his breath, "Compatible." Back in her room, she checked her arm where he'd gripped her. The skin there felt cool to the touch long after the rest of her warmed. She told herself she'd been out in the rain. Field notes. Day 29. Mine airflow inward. Thermal differential. Water metallic. Run lab panel. Second rescue. Pattern too neat. Correlation causation. Still. Watch. The porchmen started greeting her by name before she introduced herself. A child offered her a braided grass ring, for luck. Mrs. Danner, the innkeeper, placed a bowl of blackberries by her plate and said, "You're looking peaked, Evelyn." The berries tasted like nothing again. Beautiful, empty fruit. Adrian appeared more often now, but always with a reason that looked acceptable on paper. He returned a field guide she didn't remember dropping. He pointed out a stand of fur where crimson wing pellets should have been and weren't. He walked the edge of her route without stepping on it. Once, while she was kneeling to collect owl scat that turned out to be something else entirely, he reached for a bramble snagging her sleeve and nicked her wrist with a thorn. Reflex made her jerk back. A line of blood beaded and slid. He watched that line as if it contained a message, eyes darkening around the green. He touched his gloved finger to the drop and lifted it to his mouth without ceremony, like a chef tasting a reduction. "Compatible," he said softly, like he'd confirmed a calculation. Evelyn laughed. Brittle, professional. This was the second time he'd said this. "That's not how we introduce ourselves where I'm from." He inclined his head, unfazed. "Perhaps we should learn each other's customs." She cleaned the cut and went on cataloging scat. Her handwriting on that page shook. Field notes. Day 35. Locals initiating contact. Friendliness uptick. Food consistently flavorless. Check zinc deficiency. Wrist cut. Inappropriate behavior logged under social boundary. Do not be alone with him. Be armed. She made a list. Rules to survive. Black Hollow, in before sundown. Don't eat anything you didn't open yourself. Don't accept gifts you didn't ask for. Don't tell them what you fear. When Adrian appears, ask why he's there and mean it. The list helped, so did routine. She ran longer transects, added 2 more audio traps, and began mapping the village's unmarked footpaths. At the end of one, she found a shed with tools too clean for use and a row of jars labeled with dates instead of names. The jars held something dark, not jam, not wine. She told herself it was syrup and left them on the shelf. That night, her recorder picked a low, rhythmic sound under the wind. 5 tones, repeated, not a machine, not a frog, not anything on her charts. She wrote infrasound hypothesis and underlined it twice. When she stepped into the hallway to use the shared bath, a woman stood there already, motionless in the dim, head cocked like she was listening to a song that hadn't started yet. Her eyes were black, not irises, all of it. "Good evening," Evelyn said, dry mouth or not. The woman smiled and the expression traveled to no other part of her face. "Supper at sundown," she said, though it was midnight, and drifted past. Field notes. Day 42. Infrasound pattern, 5 tones. Ritual, water wheel, jars in shed. Syrup. Syrup. Hallway encounter, possible eye dilation from light change. Breathe. Evelyn tried to leave for a day, refuel, call the lab from somewhere with a signal that didn't to drop like a bird into a window. The road out wound past a stand of white birch, a tilted barn, and a rusted truck. After 20 minutes, she passed the same birch, the same barn, the same truck. She took a photo the second time. Same cloud seam, same crow on the fence. She reversed, marked every turn on a notepad, and still the landmarks repeated like a cheap stage set dragged back into place. When she returned to town, the porchmen nodded as though she'd stepped out for air. Adrian was waiting at the inn steps. "The mountain dislikes farewells," he said mildly. "No," she said, setting her jaw. "The roads are confusing." "Of course," he said. He lifted a wrapped parcel from the rail and held it out. "A present." "I don't accept." "It's a book," he said, and the softness in his voice wrong-footed her. "Field notes from a naturalist who came here before. I thought it would appeal to your methods." She took it because she had to see. Inside the paper, an old leather journal, pages ruled in a hand as neat as a seamstress's work, ink brown with age. 1869. The entries catalogued owls and foxes with the same rigor she admired. And then, without transition, the record of a herd of cattle found whitened and a man cured of consumption overnight in exchange for one evening as silence. She closed the book slowly. "I like how you insist on facts," Adrian said, watching her. "It keeps the mood clean." "Your friend in 1869 lacked peer review," she said, and kept the book. Field notes, day 48. Possible spatial disorientation. Magnetic anomaly? Check compass. Gift journal. Historical fiction? Compare paper fibers. Do not be grateful. Be grateful privately. Black Hollow relaxed around her like a snake around a warm stone. People began to pass too close, to say her name without the title like they'd earned it. The innkeeper touched her hair while passing and said, "So soft," the way a seamstress might approve a bolt of cloth. The stew remained bland, the water always cold, the pitcher never emptied. Children drew pictures in the dust with bone ends and laughed when she frowned. "Don't worry," one girl said, patting Evelyn's knee. "You won't go anywhere." At the creek, Evelyn followed fluorescent dye downstream to track dilution and saw a swirl collect where no eddy should be, a red-black bloom that held its shape like a living thing before slipping under a root and disappearing. She scooped a sample and wrote iron, algae, even as her stomach turned. That evening, Adrian walked beside her without announcing himself and fell into step like they'd done it before. "You're stubborn," he said, not unkindly. "It's a job requirement." "It's a taste," he said, considering the word. "You will like it here when you stop pretending you don't." She barked a laugh she didn't feel. "I don't stay where Data refuses to behave." He glanced down at her wrist where the nick had healed to a pale crescent. "Oh, it's behaving," he said, almost to himself. Field notes, day 56. Community proximity increased. Boundary testing, dye test, anomalous pooling, Adrian conversational shift. You will like it here. Presumption noted. Do not escalate. A moon not yet full hung like a polished coin. Her audio traps caught the 5-tone pattern again, louder, closer, as if whatever made it had stepped near the microphone and breathed. She triangulated with a headlamp and a cautious mind, marking trees with chalk. The path curved where paths shouldn't. She turned once, twice, and the forest rearranged itself into a small, open place she hadn't seen on a map. Figures moved there, quietly, efficiently. Not furtive now, comfortable. They stood over a boar held by 2 ropes strung to saplings. The animal shuddered and stilled. No one spoke. No one sang. They simply lowered their heads together as if to pray and then fed. It wasn't frenzy. It was work. Green eyes lifted first. Black eyes followed. Smiles opened like doors. No one hissed, no capes, no theatrics. The ordinariness turned her veins to ice. Evelyn took one involuntary step back and snapped a twig. Dozens of faces turned toward her, attention clicking into place the way a compass needle finds north. The forest exhaled. She ran. The world pinched into a tunnel, hemlock, rock, the sweet penny-rank smell of the creek. Her chest hurt. Something moved beside her without feet touching earth and kept pace until the path opened and he was there, waiting where the trail narrowed. Adrian, as if the mountain had set him down by hand. Adrian, what are they? She hated the tremor in her voice. He stepped forward and she retreated until bark pressed her back. His face was lit from the side by moonlight, making one eye glow, the other go dark. He set a hand beside her head, not touching, close enough to read a pulse. "You shouldn't have seen that," he said, voice low and almost tender. "Now you belong to Black Hollow." "No," she said, and her voice came out the way a trapped animal's does, thin, furious. He tilted his head, that practiced politeness settling over something older. "Did you think you were only studying us?" Her lantern slipped from her hand. The flame died as it hit the ground and rolled. Darkness, not the absence of light but presence, rose up like water and closed over her.
Don't miss part 2 where the town tightens its grip. Adrian steps closer and Evelyn faces the first price of staying alive.